Okay, good morning and welcome to another week of Introduction to Urban and Regional Planning. This week we have, um, this week we're going to have a presentation on the planning processes and the issues associated with planning processes, followed by as usual, a complementary session where I try to theorize and wrap and draw conclusions to the session, and hopefully also a brief discussion in um, a brief discussion like we had last time. Right. I have enabled screen sharing for all participants. So just before we move on, I'd like to check whether the presenting group are all the presenting group or the presenting group's members are all present.
Yes, sir. We are waiting for the chat.
Okay, great. Well, just a reminder for those of you who has just joined to mark your attendance. I'll show the QR code again at the end of this week's lesson. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I will give the floor to group 4. Okay, the time is yours.
Izin share screen, Pak.
Okay, so may I start, sir?
Yes, absolutely. The time is yours.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Mr. Fernanda and friends. Today we are going to present our presentation of the process of spatial planning. Um, Let me introduce myself. My name is Raditya Paulin Hafiz, together with Richard Immanuel Farulian and Muhammad Khalus Rehan Khairan from Group 5.
The first one is the definition. The definition of the process of spatial planning is a process of determining spatial structure and spatial patterns that covers the scope of composing and determination of spatial planning menurut Undang-Undang Nomor 26 2007 about spatial planning. The spatial planning involves attempts to plan the process of social economics and environmental change to bring about certain ends, together with drawing up plans, maps, or diagrams that indicate where socio-spatial activities should take place. International Encyclopedia of Human Geography, 2nd edition, 2020.
So before we get any deep, I'm going to explain about the brief history of spatial planning in Indonesia. And it starts in the 20th century Indonesia. Spatial planning in Indonesia began in 1926 during the occupation of Indonesia of the Dutch East Indies, when the Nuisance Ordinance was introduced. The ordinance regulated certain industrial installations in certain areas through zoning and permit systems. Then, 22 years later, the first time regulatory framework known as City Planning Ordinance or Stadtwoning Ordonansie or SBO was introduced, and then followed by the implementation ordinance known as Staatswoning Verordening or SDB in 1949. Then several legal frameworks for spatial planning were enacted between 1976 and 1992. These legal frameworks regulated particular areas, including the Greater Jakarta areas, regulated in Kepres 13 1976, Batam Island and Puncak area, and certain development sectors, including rice field areas, industrial estates, tourism, and housing. In 1982, the Ministry of Home Affairs enacted a decree on the guidance of city plan making process, which was regulated in Permendagri to 1987. Then, in October 1992, the Indonesian Parliament passed the first spatial planning law, which is the Special Planning Law 24 of 1992. And it stipulated the principles of spatial planning in Indonesia, including integrity, sustainability, effectiveness, efficiency, compatibility, harmony, openness, equality, justice, and legal protection. The people have the right to know this spatial plan and participate in the plan making process and receive this compensation when their property is acquired for public uses. The special planning law it also consists of the National Special Planning Plan or the RT/RW Nasional, the Provincial Special Plans, RT/RW Provinsi, and the District Special Plans or the RT/RW Kabupaten and Kota. All levels of the government were required to make special plans for directing the development in their respective regions. Then we move on to the 21st century. After the fall of the New Order regime, it affected the Special Planning Law of 1992 because this law is considered to be no longer relevant with the new institutional settings. Then the Indonesian Parliament passed the Bill of Spatial Planning in April 2007 to replace the older Spatial Planning Law. The central government is no longer authorized to coordinate the spatial plan in the areas consisting of 2 or more provinces. This new law has a new principle of accountability of the spatial planning that is not included in the previous law principle, and it is presumably to correspond with the enthusiasm of Indonesian people for more transparency, a response due to the dissatisfaction of the Indonesian people over the poor quality of services from the government during the New Order regime. The new spatial planning laws provides new ways to enhance the development control, including zoning, planning permits, etc. The new law also validates the importance of public participation in spatial planning.
So the next one is the aim. Its aim create a more rational territorial organization of land use and the linkage between them to balance demands for development with the needs to protect the environment and to achieve social and economic objective. There's 2 categories. The first one is to protect area to ensure natural resources are not disturbed by our developmental activities, and the second one is cultivated area, areas developable in support of potential natural resource, human resource, and etc. There's 6 planning product. The first one is detailed spatial plans, general spatial plans, space utilization plans, facilities development plans, infrastructure development plans, implementation and control. There's 3 benefit. First one is from the economically, the next one is socially, and the last one is environmentally. The benefit for economically is first to providing more stability and confidence for investment. The next one is identifying land in appropriate location to meet the need for economic development, to promoting environmental quality in both urban and rural areas. And the last one is identifying development that meets the needs of local communities. The next one is benefit socially. As to considering the needs of the local communities in policy development, to support the provision of local facilities where they are lacking, to aiding the creation and maintenance of pleasant, healthy, and safe environments. And the last one is to improving accessibility when considering the location of new development. And the last benefit is environmentally. There's encouraging energy efficiency in the layout and design of development, to conserving important environmental, historic, and cultural assets, to promoting access to development by all modes of transport. And the last one is to promoting regeneration and the appropriate use of land, building, and infrastructure.
So this is the spatial planning system in Indonesia, which are divided into three levels: nationally, provincial, and then the district level. And then it is also divided into two, based on the time frame. There is the RPJP, there's RPJP and RPJM, which is rencana pembangunan jangka panjang dan jangka menengah, or special special planning for the long term and the medium term. And then there's more detailed plans, and for each one of them, there is the RTR Pulau, which is the plans for the development of islands, and then RTR Kawasan Strategis Nasional, or the development of national strategic areas. And then below that, on the provincial level, is basically also the same. There is the RTR Kawasan Strategis Provinsi, and then below that again is RTR Kawasan Strategis Kabupaten and RTR Strategis Kota, which is development focusing on the strategic areas, and all of them are have a time frame of 20 years.
The next one is national spatial planning. National regional spatial planning contains preparation of long-term national development plans, and then preparation of national mid-term development plan, utilization of space and control of space in the national territory, the embodiment of integration, linkage, and balance of development between province as well as intersectoral harmony. And then there's determination of the location and function of space for investment, spatial planning of national strategic areas, spatial planning of for province and districts and cities, national planning policies and strategies, and the last one is policies and strategies for spatial planning in the national area include policies on the development of spatial structures and spatial patterns. The national spatial planning focus area. Access to urban services and regional economic growth, focusing on quality and service, coverage of transportation, telecommunication, energy and water resources, infrastructure network. The spatial pattern of the national territory has three parts, namely protected areas, cultivation areas, and national strategic areas, with the following objectives. Number one, safe, comfortable, productive, and sustainable national territory space. Number two, harmony between the natural environment and the artificial environment. And then the integrated use of land, sea, and airspace, including space within the earth. And there is integration of national, provincial, and district or city spatial planning. And the last one is utilization of natural resources in a sustainable manner to improve the welfare of the community.
So, as mentioned by Richard previously, there are two sections on national spatial planning, which is protected areas, cultivation areas, and national strategic areas. And this is the example of the provincial spatial planning that is from PP Nom 13 tahun 2017, Rencana Tata Ruang Wilayah Nasional 2017. And this is the development of protected areas in Indonesia, which, as you can see, there is natural preserves, cagar alam. For example, there is the cagar alam Tangkuban Perahu, Pelabuhan Ratu, and on the right side is there are codes besides them. And then if you can see on the right side of your screen, that is the description for the codes that is mentioned in the left side of the screen. Then the second one is cultivation areas. This is from the area of Yogyakarta and East Java. And as you can see, there is in Yogyakarta, it focuses on tourism, agriculture, in the industry, fisheries, and mining. And then the region of Gresik, Bangkalan, Mojokerto, Surabaya, Sidoarjo, Lamongan, or Purbalingga, Susila. It focuses mainly on agriculture, fisheries industry, tourism, and biothermal and petroleum resources. And the description on the right-hand side is same applies like the previous one. Then the last one is the national strategic areas, which this is also a development for national strategic area. For example, there is the Ujung Kulon National Park, and then the Mount Merapi National Park. And it's not only the national parks, there is also the area of the Sunda Strait, and then the area of Borobudur, Candi Prambanan, the area of Gresik, Bangkalan, Mojokerto, Surabaya, Sidoarjo, and Lamongan, or Gerbang Kertosusila, is also deemed as a national strategic area.
So the next one is the provincial spatial planning, or RTRWP. Provincial spatial planning contains number one is urban system related to rural area, to guideline for the use of regional space, which contain indication for the main 5-year medium-term program. And the last one is direction for provincial system zoning regulation, licensing direction, and others. And there's the function of the provincial spatial planning. The first one is as a basis for formulating provincial spatial planning policies and strategies. The next one is provides direction for the preparation of indication of the main program in the regional spatial plan. And the last one is as a basis for determining in the direction of controlling the use of provincial space. There's a 4 process in provincial RTRW preparation. The first one is preparation activity. The second one is data collecting. The next one is processing and data analysis. And the last one is concept formulation.
So the first step is preparation activity. It is the initial preparation for implementation. Also the preliminary study of secondary data, technical preparation for implementation, and the announcement to the public regarding the preparation of provincial spatial planning. Then the next step is data collecting, which is divided into two, primary data collecting and secondary data collecting. So primary data collecting is the screening of community aspirations that can be carried out through the distribution of questionnaires, talks, interviews, etc. Then the introduction to the physical and socioeconomic conditions of the region directly through visits to all parts of the province using surveys. And then secondary data collecting is data collecting using maps. It could be Rupa Bumi Indonesia maps, satellite images, or administrative boundary maps. And then secondary data collecting using data and information. It could be data about the population, data about the infrastructure, or even data about regional economic growth. And then the next step is the processing and data analysis. This is the analysis of the characteristics of provincial spatial planning, which analyze the physical characteristics, the social demographic, the regional economic, and the financial capacity within the regional development. Then the last step is the concept formulation, which is the formulation of the concept of regional development and the formulation of the spatial plan of province, which is consists of a both policy and provincial regional planning strategy, provincial spatial structure plan, provincial spatial pattern plan, the determination of provincial strategic areas, space utilization directions, and the direction for controlling the use of space. So this is the example of provincial spatial planning development that is from the province of DKI Jakarta. This is from the Peraturan Daerah Provinsi Daerah Peraturan Daerah Provinsi Daerah Khusus Ibu Kota Jakarta nomor 1 tahun 2012 tentang rencana tata ruang wilayah 2030. This is mainly the development of the railway transportation systems in DKI Jakarta, which is under development. For example, there is the MRT from Lebak Bulus to Bundaran HI, which is already completed. And then there is the under development projects of the Bundaran HI to Kota and the Lintas Timur Barat of the east to west lines and the connections in between. And then, for example, there's the LRT, which is the section of Rawamangun to Cibubur is still under construction. There's the Jabodetabek commuter line, and then there's the airport railway from Manggarai to the airport of Soekarno-Hatta, and this is just to mention a few.
The next one is city or regency spatial planning. In accordance with Undang-Undang Nomor 26 Tahun 2007 tentang penataan ruang pasal 11 ayat 2, district governments have the authority to implement district spatial planning. The arrangement includes district spatial planning, district spatial use, and controlling the use of district space. The functions of a district or city spatial plan include the reference in the use of space or development of a regency or city area, a reference for realizing a balanced development in regency or city area, reference in the preparation of regional long-term development plans and regional medium-term development plans, reference of investment location in regency or city territory by government, community, and private sector, guidelines for the preparation of detailed spatial plans in the district or city area, and reference in defense administration. There are several benefits of district or city spatial planning, which is realizing integrated development within the district or city, realizing the harmony of the development of the city district area with the surrounding area, and ensure the realization of the quality district or city spatial planning.
So this is the process of district spatial planning, in this case a regency spatial planning or kabupaten. So the first step is the initial preparations, which is the composing of the terms of reference, the forming the teams, the preparation of the administration, the preparation of the the consultant process. That is just to name a few, and then the next step is the review of the spatial plans, which consists of the evaluation of the comprehensiveness of the data, the methods used, the comprehensiveness of the contents of the plan, etc. And then the next step is the collecting of data, which is done by primary surveys, which is field observation, interviews, the distribution of questionnaires, etc. And then there's the secondary survey, um, with secondary survey, which involves certain agencies to obtain data from socioeconomic data, the data from human resource, the data from the natural resources, and then the data for the utilization of land, just to name a few. And then the next step is the analysis, which aspects consists of the analysis of um, the regulations and the development strategies, the regional analysis, the economic analysis, the analysis of the human resource, analysis of the natural resource, the analysis of the settlement systems, the analysis of the utilization of our land, and then there's also the analysis of infrastructure funding, and so on and so on. Then the next step is the formulating of the plan, which is which consists of structural planning and the pattern of the utilization of space, and then there's the maintenance or the management of cultivation and protected areas, and then there's the maintenance of the areas, the management of areas of villages, cities, and certain areas. And also there's the planning for the transportation system. Sorry, the utility system such as transportations, telecommunications, energy, drainage and irrigation systems, and the maintenance of the environment. And then there's the plan for the land use, air, water, and forestry, etc. And then the next step is the open discussions with all stakeholders involving the government, the private sector, the people, the local legislative, etc. And it is done by discussions through the people, with discussions and seminars, exhibits, and the gathering of the opinion of the people. And then the last step is the ratification of the regulations by the local legislature. And here is the example for district spatial planning, or in this case, city spatial planning. This is from the city of South Jakarta, which is also from the peraturan daerah Provinsi Daerah Khusus Ibu Kota Jakarta nomor 1 tahun 2012 tentang rencana tata ruang wilayah 2030. And this is particularly is development of housing settlements, which is consisting of, for example, there is the revitalization of the housing areas of Kebayoran Baru, and then there's the maintenance of the housing areas in Kebayoran Baru, Pondok Indah, and Tebet, and then there's the repair of the environment in the more crowded areas and the more prone to flooding areas in Pancoran, Tebet, Mampang, and that is just to name a few.
This one is the case study special planning challenge. In here, we found the 6 challenge. The first one is globalization. Second one is high risk of disaster. The next one is demographic change. Next one is climate change, overpopulation, and the last one is poverty and social disparity. The first one is the globalization. The increasingly widespread acceptance of democratic institution and market-based economic system. The next one is the liberalization of trade and international capital flows. The growth in the number of influence of transnational corporation. And the last one is rapid technological innovation, in particular in information and communities technology. So the next one is the high risk of disaster. Indonesia is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, frequently exposed to a range of hazards. Over 60% of Indonesia districts are exposed to a high risk of flooding. Located in the Pacific Ring of Fire with 127 active volcanoes. Indonesia also faces high seismic, tsunami, and volcanic risk. The next one is disaster impact people as well as the economy in Indonesia. And the last one is living in hazardous area, lacking access to basic services, and having limited assets and financial resource. The poor and vulnerable bear the brunt of disaster impact. So the next one is the demographic change. The increase of the diversity of demands of different groups of people and the varied quantitative population development depending on the spatial type. The next one is demand-oriented planning for infrastructure and dealing with volunteering in the hierarchy of public service provision. The next one is maintaining the attractiveness of rural areas as place to live and work. And the last one is tackling issues of new and affordable housing, intergenerational, participative, neighborhood development, as well as integration.
The next challenge is climate change. Water availability that impacts the decreasing of rainfall during the year may translate into high drought risk. And then sea levels rising, which is currently increasing at 1 to until 3 millimeters per year in coastal areas of Asia, and is projected to accelerate to a rate of about 5 millimeters per year over the next century. And up to 50% of Asia's total biodiversity is at risk. And last one is increasing diseases such as diarrhea and endemic morbidity and mortality. Next challenge is overpopulation. Indonesia is the fourth most populous country in the world, but its population is centered mainly on the island of Java. Java Island accounts for 56.1% or 151.59 million people of the population. Overpopulation in Indonesia causes several problems and issues. The high unemployment rate, uh, the centralization of the population due to lack of infrastructural growth in more rural areas, and increasing poverty and homelessness rate in urban areas. Due to the lack of infrastructure development in more rural areas, people tend to migrate from their hometowns to more urban settlements to search for better living and earning. This makes the more urban areas more crowded and increases people living in slums. And the last challenge is economic and social disparity. Um, income income inequality, which is the widening gap in the income distribution, has been a concern for Indonesia, which causes issues such as poverty and social disparities among the people. And there is unequal opportunity. People living in the more rural eastern parts of Indonesia are more likely to not have the same facilities, infrastructures, utility services, and education than the more urban areas of Java.
Okay, so after these challenges, there are also issues of spatial planning in Indonesia. First one is the lack of legal action towards someone who violates spatial planning regulations. Violators from spatial planning rarely get sanctions. As a result, irregularities in the use of spatial planning are considered to be normal and have no meaning. The conditions result into chaos in the implementation of regional spatial planning. For example, if there is a regulation that is no street vendors on the side of the street, but street vendors still sell their things in the side of the street. So the government needs to be more firm in legal action towards violators, and there needs to be a socialization of the inhabitants regarding these special planning laws that apply. Then the second one is special planning is always integrated with development plans. Special planning is combined with development plans, and it and results in confusion because special planning should be used as a reference in development plans. The government should make and revise the current spatial planning laws and that applies so it could be more focused on the development based on the interest and necessity of all parties. The third one is spatial planning is dominated by political decisions. As Indonesia is still dwelling on political instability, many policy and decision makers decide or issue policies that are not objective, especially in the field of spatial planning. Spatial planning should refer to the objectivity of regional characteristics and not political policies. If this happens, it will result in land use that is not optimal. Usually, this happens because by agreement and bribes by the political officials. So, national development this should be based on the people's interests and aspirations, and it should involve more from the people in the decision-making process. And then the last one is not all regions in Indonesia have a regional spatial plan in accordance with the national spatial plan. Because according to the records of the Ministry of Public Works, in 2015, only 51% of 34 provinces in Indonesia has had regional regulations or perda on regional spatial planning. Without clear local regulations, local governments will experience difficulties in regulating the allocation of an area and taking action if there is a violation of the spatial plans in their area. So again, the government should regulate spatial planning laws equally distributed to all the regions. Okay, thank you very much for listening to our presentation. Um, uh, are there any questions?
Well, thank you very much for that very comprehensive presentation um, on urban on spatial planning processes and issues associated with spatial planning. Um, we let's have a question and answer session. I'll give a chance, an opportunity to your classmates and peers to uh, perhaps ask a question and or give comments to the presenting group. Um, would anybody like to? Would anybody like to ask a question, or does anybody have a question? Your presentation was super comprehensive. That's why everybody's like that. Everybody seems to be like, yeah, all clear. Anybody at all? Um, well, you let me kick off the discussion then. You mentioned that during the transition between the new, when during the fall of the new order era, um, people demanded more transparency. To the best of your knowledge, how transparent is our planning system right now?
Let me answer that question, sir. To my knowledge, um, the transparency of the government regarding spatial planning processes in the more rural areas is still not very good because it proves that today there is still issues of the spatial planning, as I mentioned before. There are the spatial planning that is more dominated by political reasons rather than the necessity and um, kebutuhan masyarakat. So, thank you.
Okay. Um, then what do you think? What do you think is what sort of solution could you propose to um, what sort of solution could you propose to overcome uh, this political this I know planning is usually very politically charged, but what sort of solution could you offer to minimize this political load?
In my opinion, although it might not be very optimal, but the the national development has to be more based on the people's interest, and so the government needs to be um, more transparent and um, they need to hear the people's voices and aspirations, um, and maybe um, they should use their political power to make the development process to involve the people more in the decision making process.
Thank you. That was the that was the key word that I was looking for. Involving or encouraging the participation or public participation in the planning process. And yes, that not only the central government, but all the way down to the provincial and more local levels. Um, I think authorities need to listen. And here's the thing: I take issue. I have a problem. I have a problem with the word pemerintah, because in my opinion, the our elected officials. So our elected officials from whatever level, the House of Representatives, all the way to the president. Um, yes, they govern, but um, it's I prefer to call them as I prefer to call or refer to them as the country's managers and the city's managers and so on. So they should not command, they should not be mereka seharusnya tidak memerintah. That's what I'm trying to say. They should not command, because we are not we are not a military regime. We are not troops, but they should manage more rather than command more. So yeah, listen to the voices, of the citizens. Take into account, take their voices and their opinions into account. And I think if when you can do so, then you should be on the right track. But yeah, but then again, feel free to disagree with me, anyone. It's okay if you disagree. I'm quite happy. I'm quite happy if some of you don't agree. All right. Before I move on to showing you an example of transparency in planning, would anybody like? Does anybody else have any questions or comments for the group? Yes, Indira.
I'd like to ask a question. Earlier, you guys mentioned about one of the issues that is dealt with spatial planning, which is overpopulation. Currently, Jakarta is facing an increasing number of overpopulation. So how is spatial planning going to offer solutions to that issue? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Indira, for the question. So, in my opinion, as Jakarta is getting more crowded and crowded every day, it is an issue of overpopulation. As this is a spatial planning issue, um, but Jakarta does not have any more space. So what I think is the solution is to revitalize all of the aspects in the Jakarta, which is, for example, the slum areas, etc. And then that's why there's also another scenario of um, memindahkan the capital city to the island of Kalimantan, uh, which the utilization of space in Kalimantan is not yet that overcrowded in the island of Java. So yeah, that is in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Andy.
I think if I weigh in a little bit on that, I think overpopulation becomes an issue when a overpopulation becomes an issue when the city cannot accommodate them. As long we can't really stop and we shouldn't really stop a city from growing and developing. So um, and we need to be able to leverage we need to be able to leverage all of the advancements in knowledge and technology to be able to accommodate this ever growing population and this ever developing city, whether it's whether it's by intensifying our development and uh, building more vertical structures, or if the geographical area allows it, then we can expand uh, laterally uh, up to a certain extent. Of course, we don't want the city to be to grow physically too big. We don't want we don't want uncontrollable sprawl. So we do need to leverage and take advantage of and take advantage of all the advancement in knowledge and technology to control that physical growth, yet to control the growth physically, yet still allow for room for development and such. If that makes any sense. So we can't really stop it. I think the best thing we can do is to contain, control, and manage the growth, especially for there are several techniques, there are several approaches, very creative approaches that we will have a look at, that we will learn in urban management. I think in the next few semesters, how to manage. We'll have a look at how to manage fast-growing cities, especially fast-growing cities in the global south, like Southeast Asia, South Asia, and other developing countries. So, anyone else care to share their opinion and or questions? If not, I think a few weeks ago I shared with you our digital collection of spatial plans, and I said uh, although the digital spatial plan library is not yet as comprehensive as it should be, but we are moving in the right direction. Um, Allow me to share with you a wait. Allow me to share with you an example of how that transparency, or when that electronic or digital spatial plan library and catalog is available, what it can do for and what it can do for what it can do for us, or what it can do for what it means for planning and such. So here I'm sharing with you the Brisbane City Council website. Within this website, there is a special tab that I'd like to highlight, and that is the Planning and Building tab. And in the Planning and Building tab, we can immediately see planning-related issues or building-related issues such as izin mendirikan bangunan, or building permit and building approvals. Sorry. Here, but I'm not going to go into the approval and permits and the application process and everything, but it's more to the planning guidelines and tools section that I'm interested in. So here we have they have a special tool or a special application for property development, and all the related administrative requirements to it. You can also access the latest city plans. So they're sticking with the 2014 plan, which is that's their most up-to-date plan so far. However, they do have instruments. They do have instruments to ratify and to modify the special policies and special sections of the plan. They have instruments in place so that if the context changes, because cities always grow and develop, so if it changes so much so that they will issue a policy, to stop a certain section of the plan and then modify it and let it evolve. And then they have the neighborhood planning and urban renewal, and so on and such. They have planning guidelines. These are usually online documents that you can access, but it's the online tools that I'm interested in. And within the planning and building online tools, this is how I envision our own digital spatial plan library would look like. Hopefully, one day we will be able to provide. Sorry. No, that's all right, mate. So sorry about that. But one day, because group 4 mentioned something about transparency, and so this hopefully that one day we will reach this level of transparency. Within this, the development.I is the development search and tracking tool that you can apply for. You can apply for a development permit, or you can check if there are any development applications that are on its way. The eBIMAP2 mapping service. Unfortunately, this is a subscription-based service. So you can access a GIS like an online GIS like tool to sort of simulate your development and check to see what sort of permits you need and so on. So before before lodging a building permit application, you can sort of simulate, what if I do this to my what if I do this to my lot? What if I do this to my building? What sort of permits would I need? And so on and so on. So unfortunately, since this is a paid subscription, this is a paid subscription service. So I think that's quite an ingenious way that the council is trying to generate revenue of some sort. And then you can also search by property address or lot plan ID to see to see what plans the council have uh, for the future. Unfortunately, the city plan online seems to be offline at the moment, but you can check local heritage places. This is where they have this is where they have the database for different for different culturally or historically significant buildings across the city. So that's I think that's pretty awesome, and this is something that we are also building towards. So I think one day we will have one day we should have an accessible database such as this. Tram shelter number 3, or it used to be tram shelter number 3. It may not look like it, but apparently this tram shelter is historically significant. So that's the local heritage places online. You can even check protected vegetation. So you can imagine the level of detail that the city council is the level of detail in transparency that the city council is trying to provide, and it seems like the online service is currently offline. That's all right. Oh, it just popped up. But yeah. I remember when I was when I showed such application to some of our colleagues in the department. They said, well, if the problem with us is the problem in Indonesia is that, as the group said, that spatial planning is politically charged, is heavily politically charged. They such a level of transparency could actually lead to many class action lawsuits. So that's interesting. This is the protected vegetation map. Shows vegetation protected by natural assets local law and so on. And so it yeah, to be honest, this is actually the first time I accessed this map. I've accessed this. I've accessed the online city plan before, but that was a few years ago. But you can imagine that this is what you can do. This is what you can do, and this is what you should do with the digital spatial plans that you will be generating when you transition into professional to your professional careers. The floodwise property report is another interesting. There's another interesting feature. When you launch it, you can search for individual. You can search for flood risk reports and any flood related plans, development plans. So, for example, if I go to one of the suburbs there, this is the street where I used to live, number 52, USHTML, search USHTML, and you get a floodwise property report such as this. It has a property or lot-based flood information report for such and such lot detail. That's the lot code that you should quote every time you check for any development related plans. The sort of scheme the sort of scheme or the sort of management scheme that they have in the neighborhood. It says here this property has no flood levels or flags for building or development purposes, and that makes sense because this address happens to be perched on top of a hill. So no, so if the building is flooded, then I suppose the whole city is underwater. Flood planning, flood overlay. There are currently no river, creek, waterway that apply to this property. No coastal hazard overlays because it is far from the coast, and so on and so on and so on. So I believe this is the sort of service that that our governments are trying to work towards at the moment. But to be able to build this sort of database, to be able to build this sort of, to be able to provide this sort of service, you would need a huge amount of database. You would need that not only huge but also very detailed, very detailed database, and such and the provision of such databases is still a challenge, I think, to our still a challenge to our government. So, allow me to summarize what Group 4 has presented. So, okay, now. When we talk about spatial plans or spatial planning as an activity, there are three distinct properties and features, or in our language or in our vocabulary, tiga karakteristik perencanaan ruang atau tata ruang. So, three distinct properties and features of spatial planning. First, it is a cycle. Planning is a never-ending process, a never-ending process of problem statement, a formulation of definition or the definition of aims or goals and objectives, and then followed by program development, and then finally project implementation. And once project implementation is on its way, you can identify more problems or new problems. Thus, you come back to problem statement, and then you define your aims and objectives, and you propose or formulate programs, and then implement these programs. So whatever experience is picked up during the implementation will be used as an input to the upcoming planning cycle. The second property or the second feature is integrated integrated. Planning is a process that entails several different interconnected activities that should not be viewed as separate entities or separate activities. And that brings us to the third feature of planning, which is non-sequential. Non-sequential here means that the planning process is not fully sequential. Sequential is like, a relay race, lari estafet, where you pass on the baton, where you pass the baton on from one runner to the other. That's sequential, and planning is not like that. So the planning process, I think you guys have described it already. It's iterative. So you go back and forth, and the process actually encourages different entities, different activities, and different expertise to communicate with each other. Another reason why planning is a non-sequential process is because of is due to these so-called real-world complexities. The real world, kenyataan di lapangan, is very complex, and these complexities make it difficult for planning to be a fully sequential process. So you might run into a problem in its implementation and application, and you have to go back to the drawing board. You have to come back to the problem statement. You have to reevaluate your goals and aims and objectives and so on. So the idea of a spatial plan is to achieve a specific predetermined goal. Group 4 has already mentioned that, to achieve something by arranging socioeconomic activities spatially and so on. So the idea of the spatial plan is, I repeat, to achieve a specific predetermined goal or predetermined goals. A plan is a means to an end that describes how to achieve these predetermined goals, such as, I don't know, a more sustainable environment, or perhaps one of the goals is to achieve better social cohesion, and so on and so forth. Now, a common misconception or a common misunderstanding is that some people, not everyone, but some people, most people see the spatial plan as a rigid blueprint. So when you draft the plan, then that's a blueprint. Like for example, if you draft a plan or a design for designs for a building, that's a blueprint for a building, yes, but spatial plans don't work that way. They're not a rigid blueprint. A spatial plan, whatever scale it is, needs a degree of flexibility, because planning is strongly tied to policy making and implementation. So once again, it's not a rigid blueprint. That's why if you have the chance to have a look at, say, the national level spatial plan, Rencana Tata Ruang Wilayah Nasional, when you look at that level, then the plans are more normative and more general, in the sense that, we would like to build our nation such and such and such. And then this vision gets translated into the provincial master plans, and it gets and the words, the terminologies that they use, and the scale is more compact, more detailed, and it gets broken down. It gets broken down, and the level of detail gets added as the planning scope narrows. The other thing to remember is that planning is a continuous process, meaning that plans are constantly updated. It's not a one-off process. Despite spatial plans having a lifespan of 10 to 20 years, for example, but it's not like, okay, we have a plan for 2009 until 2020, we're good. It's not like that. That's what I meant by one-off planning. We've done this spatial plan, we're good. Just leave it alone. But you have to continuously review and revise these plans as we continue to move and develop, because the context, the political atmosphere, the economic landscape may change, the social and demographic factors, or social and demographic elements to a city may change. So it's an iterative and continuous process. You have to constantly review and revise according to changes to its context. It's a never-ending process. And lastly, who can be considered as a planner? What is exactly a professional planner, or quote unquote professional planner? I believe that the term planner is an all-encompassing term that describes all parties and all individuals that are involved in the planning process. So that includes politicians, that includes bureaucrats, and of course, that includes the people, the general public, the citizens, the ones that you actually have to listen to. Now, the planning stages or the planning process has been explained extensively by Group 4, which is a massive effort there. Awesome. I'm gonna take the seven stages of planning by Nia Pontoh and Iwan Kustiwan in their book Introduction to Urban Planning, or Pengantar Perencanaan Perkotaan. I'm not sure what edition they have. I'm not sure what edition they have out now. I have the 2009. I have the 2009 book. If you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend this book because it gives you a nice broad overview of urban planning and spatial planning in general. So they suggest after analyzing several processes that occur globally and locally, they found that or they suggest that there are 7 stages to planning: problem statement, the definition of goals and objectives, data collection, and then analysis, and then formulating and considering alternatives, implementation, and then monitoring and evaluation. So at the first, or at the top, at the beginning, there's problem statement. So the problem statement describes an observable phenomena that presents a gap between what exists, what is going on right now, and what is expected in the future. It can mean that certain requirements be met in the future. We need more houses, we need more jobs, and so on. Or perhaps the problem statement describes a disparity to be eliminated. Or right now our unemployment rate is at so and so percent, or maybe our poverty rate is at so and so percent, and we need to get rid of that. We need to address that. We need to do something about that. So that's the problem statement. And the problem statement usually consists of 4 elements: the background, the identification of the problem, the scope, and formulation. So in the background, a problem usually manifests itself when there is an imbalance or friction in the constellation of factors within a context. So the context I mean is place, and factors, what I mean by factors include political factors, the economy, social and cultural factors, and an array of several other factors. So all of these factors, or all of these drivers that make a city or a region what it is. There may be an imbalance there. The political factor may have friction, may have a friction in with the economic factor. The economic factor may have friction, or may have an imbalance with the social and cultural factors, and so on, and that creates problems. So identification. Once there are indications of a problem, once you sense that there is a problem, we need to be able to identify the problem. So being able to to properly identify a problem is actually the first step to unraveling the mechanisms behind the problem. So once you and then once you understand, once you fully understand the problem, okay, this is where the friction is. This is where the issue is. It could be a political issue, it could be a regulatory issue, it could be a social issue, and so on. And then you try to limit your scope. To limit your scope to find out who the troublemakers are, or which factors, whether political, social, economic, environmental, which of these many different factors is or are the actual culprits. Which of these are causing the trouble. Um, so, but we have to isolate. We have to be able to first isolate and to isolate what factors are related directly to the problems and what factors do not. So maybe not all of these drivers, not all of these elements or components to the urban context or regional context are troublemakers. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And then once we have isolated these troublesome factors, we can properly formulate the problem statement. So a wise man once told me that a well-defined problem statement is half a solution. So once you understand where the problem is, who the troublemakers are, then we just need to ask the right question. We need to state the questions to which we seek the answers. So how do we deal with these economic issues? How do we deal with these social issues? How do we deal with overcrowding? How do we deal with out migration, for example? We don't want our population to we don't want to continue losing our population. We'd like to attract people to come to our place, and so on. So once we have identified these issues, then it's up to the goals and objective settings. So let's say, for example, the goal is to attract more people to come to our city. We want to grow, and we want to develop our city. And to do so, we need more people to come. We need more people to come, work, live, and contribute to the society. Getting people to come is the main goal, or maybe to grow the city is the main goal. The first objective would be to attract people, and to attract people, maybe you need to establish jobs, you need to establish housing, you need to provide other basic services and utilities to accommodate the projected growth. But how can we predict how fast our city or our region will grow? How can we solve this problem? How can we understand the mechanisms to a problem and such and such? Well, you would of course need data. And within spatial planning, there are at least 3 different types of data. This is just a general category of the different kinds of data that you would work with in planning. The spatial distribution of things. So a distribution data, a data set that describes the distribution and the network of different facilities, the distribution of services, and the distribution of people. So this is usually a geographical data, and then data that show the relationship between one sector to another. So if you want to look at how the economic sector impacts or influences social development, then you would need a certain data set for that, and that sort of data will then show you the relationship between one factor and another. And of course, time series data. Time series data is the data set that you would need to be able to look into the historical context of things, and then you can use these historical data to project and to predict what will happen in the future. And once you have all these data, you can have, and then you can conduct several different types of analysis. With basic or foundational data, such as time series or historical data, then you can describe existing conditions. You can explain why things are the way they are. With time series data, you can analyze that. With time series data, with the analysis, you can project future trends through extrapolation. Those of you who are familiar with statistics, I'm sure you've been introduced to statistics in high school mathematics. But you will have I think you will have a specific course on planning statistics. So that course will help you with the prediction and projection side of things. And then the scenario or the solution part. You analyze these data. You analyze the foundational data. You analyze the projections, and you take these into consideration to formulate solutions, to formulate scenarios, to predict what would happen in the future. There is also another way of looking at the analytical process. So basically, when you conduct an analysis, you either conduct spatial analysis, overlays, and so on, using spatial distribution data, and then you can also conduct sector analysis, so different sectors. If you're into regional or urban economy, then you would use economic data to help you make your decisions, or temporal data like time series and historical data and such. So this is just another way of looking at the different types of data and different types of analysis that occur within planning. Once analysis is out of the way, it's time to formulate alternatives. Now, in general, there are three types of alternatives or three types of solutions: the non-action alternative, policy-based alternative, and then the new alternative or the creative alternative. The first one, the non-action alternative. People tend to take this non-action alternative lightly, but a non-action alternative is basically a scenario where you ask yourself, what happens if you leave these things alone? For example, you observed or you identified the issue of disparity in your city or in your region. A non-action alternative would be, what happens if I let this disparity be? What happens if I leave it alone? Ada disparitas, biarin aja. What happens in the next 10 years? What happens in the next 100 years, for example? So that's the sort of thing that non-action alternative is like. And what non-action alternative does is provide you with a baseline, sort of like, this is the baseline, this is where we don't want to be. Another example of non-action alternative is if you're dealing with natural hazards, for example, sea level rise. Right now, and this is a fact, right now the northern coast of Java, Pantai Utara, Pantura, north coast of Java, is experiencing a 5 millimeter increase, annual increase in sea level rise. So the water surface rises 5 millimeters, about 5 millimeters each year. And in some areas also experience land subsidence. So a non-action alternative to that situation would be what happens if we let this continue in 50 years? So in 50 years, then the water level would have risen 250 millimeters. What happens when the sea level rises 250 millimeters? Or these settlements, these houses, these villages would be inundated, so and so and so and so. In other words, that's what we don't want to happen. A policy-based alternative is a alternative or a solution that is formulated within the current legal framework or the current policy framework. Policy-based alternatives are generally quite limited in they're quite limited in action. Ruang geraknya terbatas because of the policy constraints, and so usually policy-based alternatives are usually show incremental changes, or they have very little impact, very incremental impacts, if any. The other sort of alternative or the other sort of solution is the completely new, completely creative solution that sort of ignores the current policies. Ignoring the current policy is not all bad. It's just another way of me saying that a new alternative would be to recommend new policies. This policy is out of date. It's no longer relevant to our context. It is time for a change. Once we've settled on what sort of alternative we like to do, policy-based, new alternative, or non-action, then we move on to implementation. By definition, I believe that implementation is the interaction between the goals that we have set and the actions that we take to achieve these goals. The goal is to eradicate poverty. And what are the actions? What are the steps that we take to achieve this poverty eradication? The goal is to provide more housing. So what sort of steps are we taking to provide more housing, and so on? So that's the implementation phase. At this phase, the planner's role is minimized. It's not totally gone, but it's minimized. It's very, very limited. Planners are once again involved when the planning process moves into the monitoring and evaluation stage. What is the difference between monitoring and evaluation? Well, monitoring is where you measure progress and completion. Have your goals been met? Have your goals been met according to timeline? Do we need more time? Have the goals been met ahead of time? And so on. And the measurements of progress during the monitoring phase will then be an input to the evaluation of the plan. Is the plan efficient? Is the plan effective? Is it achieving its goals properly, and so on? And after the monitoring and evaluation, we go back all the way to the problem definition. If the plans happen to be ineffective, if the plans happen to be inefficient, then that's a new problem. Where did we go wrong? And so the cycle continues. So yes, I said there are seven. There are seven steps, but if you look at the subsets of the steps, then we do end up with actually a 9-stage process. So beginning with problem statement, goals and the definition of goals and objectives, data collection, analysis, and formulation. First 6 stages, these are the actual spatial planning stages. The actual spatial planning process lies. At the implementation stage, that's the space utilization. That's where people use the planning documents as guidelines to development and such. And then this is the control stage, the monitoring and evaluation, and perhaps even re-evaluation um, of the alternatives, selection alternatives, and the implementation stage. And the results of the re-evaluation feeds into the first step once again, into the problem statement. So this is an iterative process, and this is what I meant by planning is a never-ending process. It's not once you finish selecting alternatives, it's off to implementation, and then I couldn't care less. So it's not like that. Once we reach implementation stage, right afterwards we come into monitoring and reevaluation, and that's where we assess how we're doing, where did we go wrong, and we try to continually fix that. And this is also a reflection of our daily lives, of our daily activities. We continue to grow, we continue to change. Our needs, our requirements evolve as we grow. They change as we grow. Our preferences change as we grow. So the solutions that worked for us 5 years ago, 10 years ago, may not work for us anymore now. So we need new solutions. We need better solutions, and so on and so on. I think that's all. That's all of my summary of Group 4's presentation. I hope that it has complemented the group presentation well. If you do have any comments or questions, you may deliver them now. If not, then I would like to thank Group 4 once again for their very, very comprehensive presentation. And I also thank everyone else in the class for participating in today's discussion. I hope you found this session fruitful, wait, we're on week 6 now, so we have one more week. So next week we have one more group presentation, and then in week 8 we will have a mid semester exam. I'd like to remind you that the mid semester exam will be an online quiz that is administered through Classroom. It will most likely be predominantly multiple choice questions. I haven't really decided how many questions just yet, but it will be predominantly multiple choice, maybe 1 or 2 essay questions, but you will have to do these. You will have to do the quiz online. And although, and this is the way I usually do it, although the quiz it is scheduled for week 8, that means you will be able to access the quiz throughout week 8 of the semester. In other words, you will be able to access the quiz from Monday to Friday. Access it whenever you want, but once you access the quiz, you will have maybe 1.5 or 2 hours to complete the quiz. I may consider allowing you more than one attempt at the quiz, but we'll see how it goes. Right, because we still have another week anyways. So thank you once again for joining me this morning. Many thanks again to the group. Many thanks again for the discussions that take place. I look forward to Group 5's presentation next week. So have a great day, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy, and see you all next week. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.